It's a phone call a lot of Canadians have received and more than a few have lost a lot of money over. A call that threatens its victims with jail time if they don't cooperate. W5 travels to India to expose an international call center scheme that's defrauded tens of thousands of Canadians out of millions of dollars. And it all begins in the most innocent way.
The issue at hand is extremely time-sensitive and very urgent. We have received a legal notice against your name regarding tax fraud, tax evasion.
That's a voicemail message tens of thousands of Canadians have received that very quickly turns into a direct threat.
Call us back on our hotline before this case gets registered against you or you get arrested under the charges.
This woman got that call. We've agreed to obscure her face and voice and call her Lucy because she fears she could lose her job if her boss found out how she was taken. When Lucy listened to that voicemail, she immediately called the number left on the message.
When I call back, they sound like that. Ma'am, you have been arrested.
They were that aggressive.
That's very aggressive.
Terrifying calls, not from the Canada Revenue Agency at all, but from an illegal call center in India, where most of the callers are young men and most head to work at night, daytime in North America. Their job was to wait for callbacks from people like Lucy, convinced they were calling a CRA official in Ottawa.
I called him back. He said, ma'am, you have been arrested. This file will go to RCMB and RCMB will come to my office right away and I will be handcuffed.
And you had fear?
Yes, I have a fear because I thought that if they come to my work, handcuff me, and then people at work would know.
They have you terrified.
Yes, yes.
W5 obtained recordings of the calls from India to victims across North America.
As a tax investigation officer, I did my job to notify you the lawsuit so that you cannot say to the judge that no one notify you and the person who is going to pay the consequences is only you.
The threats are blunt and brutal.
And the local police department will approach you at your place with an arrest warrant.
So do you know who you're talking to on the phone? Does he have a name or she?
Yes, I do. I write out everything.
So who was that?
Jason.
So you believe that you're talking to Revenue Canada?
Yes.
Lucy says she's always obeyed the law and paid her taxes.
So in my life, we never do anything wrong. So that's why I'm so afraid. I just thinking in my mind, if they arrested me.
As Canada's tax collector, a call from Revenue Canada can often mean trouble. This scam played on that fear of the powers of the taxman.
First of all, we need to stop your arrest warrant, and the minimum amount to stop your arrest warrant is $2,000.
That's $2,000 or face arrest. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre first became aware of the scam in late 2013. A handful of complaints quickly became a flood in 2014 and then kept building. The National Anti-Fraud Centre in North Bay, Ontario was swamped.
You've lost just over $6,000, is that correct?
Jeff Thompson has examined hundreds of CRA scam reports.
When the call center's call volume just shoots right up, then we know we got a problem.
So when you broke down the scam, what was going on?
In this case, they were clearly extorting the victims into paying.
Very aggressively.
Very aggressively, yeah. There was a lot of fear in victims. It was the fear and panic they were trying to create with the victims. You owe money, you're going to be arrested, deported, fined, charged.
How quickly do they put pressure on people to pay?
They're going to keep them on the phone. They're going to direct them to the nearest store, the nearest money service business, bank. It's hours.
Hours of trauma for Lucy. That man on the phone calling himself Jason from Revenue Canada sent her to a store. To many, his demand sounds simply unbelievable.
And he told me go to the iTunes, buy only iTunes card that can clear this system.
Lucy was ordered to pay that fake tax bill with prepaid cards, usually used to buy music online. So did you at that moment say, why am I being asked to buy iTunes cards to clear a tax system? Did that seem possible to you?
I did not think because I was so nervous.
You were panicking?
Yes.
Lucy says she didn't even know what an iTunes card was.
I never buy this card before. I only use a credit card to buy things.
Right.
The payment methods we see, they often try and use something that is hard to trace. Something that's going to be a one-time payment method that may not be account-based.
So in the CRA scam, was this a common way of people having to pay these?
Yeah, I'd say it was probably the most common way.
Really? Prepaid cards, iTunes cards?
Yep.
But how did the scammers turn iTunes cards into cash? That man Jason made Lucy read out the numbers of each card over the phone.
Give me the number from the iTunes card. We will refund you right away after that we clear on the system.
So they would want you to give them this number,
Yes,
which is really tough, and you get on the phone.
yes.
Because it's a prepaid card with the number in hand, the scammers sold them through online resale sites around the world. Here they are being sold on a Chinese website. Lucy was told to buy $1,000 of iTunes cards. Up $1,000, Jason now knew Lucy was an easy mark. Over a 4-hour period, he sent Lucy back and forth between 2 stores, buying thousands of dollars in iTunes cards again and again, 7 times in all. This is the stack of the cards Lucy bought that day. She's kept them all.
How much was each one of these cards?
$500.
One of these is $500?
Yes.
Lucy, this is a ridiculous number of iTunes cards.
Yes.
Lucy was far from alone. The Anti-Fraud Center estimates up to 50,000 Canadians fell for the CRA phone scam. And they forked out more than $6 million in less than 3 years. And that's just what was reported.
You got to remember that fraud's grossly underreported. Victims don't report for various reasons: embarrassment, shame. For every 1 report we get, you know, there might be 10 more out there or 100 more out there.
It's a busy call center.
This call uses the same technique that terrified Lucy into paying.
So do you have a debit card with you?
Yes.
So you can use a debit card, okay?
Is a debit card better for them?
Yeah, and ma'am, listen to the second
It's
rule.
wherever they're buying,
listen
whatever
to the second
product
rule.
she's buying, whatever payment they
Ma'am,
accept.
and you also not discuss this with any of the third party.
Very common tactic.
Don't tell the cops, don't tell anybody else.
Yeah.
So ma'am, just let me know when you're into the car, okay?
A key to this scam's stunning success: trust.
Trust is, I think, a key facilitator of money loss.
So they prey on trust.
It's that fear. It's your psychological state of mind. Like you're trapped into what you believe is the real CRA.
I didn't think that it's a scam. I never think of my life that there is a scam. I thought that Revenue Canada is Revenue Canada.
So how much did you end up giving?
$25,000 altogether. I used it in my 3 credit cards.
How did you let somebody make you believe that you had to give them $25,000?
I did not know. I don't know why I did it.
The relentless pressure
I wanted the money.
of a long-distance scheme.
He thinks that the call is coming from Canada.
When W5 continues.
This is an automated message from CRA.
Before this case gets registered against you or you get arrested under the charges.
Don't call immediately, then you'll be sole responsible for all legal consequences.
A widespread phone scam terrified this woman.
He said, ma'am, you have been arrested with a very sensitive case.
Lucy followed the orders of a man claiming to be from the Canada Revenue Agency. She bought a stack of iTunes cards. The numbers on those cards resold on online sites and turned into cash by the scammers. The extortion sting on Lucy went on for 4 hours and cost her $25,000. But Lucy is just one of thousands of victims of a phone scam that began on the other side of the world, in India. Legal call centers operate in cities across that country, and millions of young Indians find work at them. Many in and around Mumbai, India's largest city. The sheer size of the industry is staggering.
It doesn't feel good because, you're taking a rich white Canadian for a ride.
Vijay Mukhi is managing director of a Mumbai Computer Institute.
Call center business for India is very, very big. So even if 10%, 15% is illegitimate, we're talking about 10, 20 billion Canadian dollars.
And raking in those billions illegally doesn't take much planning. It's easy to set up an illegal operation.
Within 2 days, he sets up the entire telecom system, routers, everything, so that you can now make international calls. And for the person you're calling up, he thinks that the call is coming from Canada and not from India.
Young Indians are eager to sign up for the jobs that, by Indian standards, pay very well.
Call centers have given us a boost. We were able to make money even, higher management people don't make.
This man, we're calling him Raviv, worked at legal call centers for 10 years. We've agreed to conceal his identity because he's now facing charges. Raviv saw an online call center ad promising more money, which he quickly figured out was because he was scamming people.
Making money totally depended upon me as to what kind of collection I did. And if you're good enough, I would say incentives were marked to infinity.
So it's all on commission?
It's all on commission based. Plus, you get a handsome salary.
Raviv says he stood to make $24,000 Canadian a year. That's $18,000 more than his pay was at a legitimate call center.
I wanted the money. I wanted the money so badly that I actually stayed there. That cost me a lot.
It cost Raviv jail time. After this raid in October of 2016, police surrounded this 6-story office building in a Mumbai suburb called Thane. Raviv was working that night.
I just saw the cops, coming in.
And what went through your mind?
I'm in a big mess. I found myself in a soup.
We raided on a very, very big scale. Bogus call center chal rahe the.
Thane's police chief, Harmveer Singh, led the raid.
Do you know how many dollars were part of this scam?
No, we would not know for exactly how much money was totally.
It was, though, in dollar terms, millions of dollars.
That's right, yeah.
At least.
It would be.
It's a short drive from police headquarters through the crowded streets of Thane to the area of the illegal call center. The raid netted about 700 people, mostly young Indians, desperate to improve their lives.
This is an incredibly dense place, 4 times the size of Toronto, with many people living in small one-room apartments or slums, barely earning a few dollars a day. So when someone opened a new call center in this neighborhood, promising commissions to earn in a month what many earn in a year, you want to bet a lot of people were ready to sign up.
We met another young man at a tea stand, and we're calling him Max.
Yeah.
How are you, man?
I'm doing well.
Kevin, nice to meet you.
Yeah, hi.
So this is where you worked.
In exchange for concealing his identity, he agreed to talk to W5 about the raid and the work he did up in this building. He is not one of those charged. He took us to the now abandoned office to take a look. It is still a crime scene. The computers and their hard drives have been removed and seized by police. But a coffee cup and even notes by callers still lie on the desks, along with detailed instructions on what to say to extort money from taxpayers in Canada and the United States. Max says it was his first call center job. His trainers told him he was working for the tax man, collecting unpaid taxes.
They just told me that you're gonna get your salaries, and if you convince someone to pay their taxes, then you will get some incentives thing.
Max was instructed to use threats to get the money. It's right here on a cheat sheet left behind after the raid. Here's the script we found alongside a tape of a call made from this office.
There is a lawsuit filed under your name regarding tax evasion or tax fraud.
When I look at some of the things that you were having to tell people, when you were telling them that people would come and arrest them.
Yes, right.
And that if they didn't turn over the money, they could be deported. You must have heard on the other end of the phone how that upset people.
Yes.
You don't think you were scaring people?
Yes, it was kinda scaring, but I don't have option instead of scaring.
Scaring victims again and again for a big payday.
So help me understand why a young man would want to work for these underground call centers.
If you work for an illegal call center, it could be 3,000, 10,000. It all depends upon how good you are at conning people, at scaring people. That's the only skill you need.
Raviv knew how to con.
Now, I've been aggressive all my life. Person who's actually crying out loud just to let us know that please don't do this.
Threat after threat, scaring victims, only stopped by that massive police raid. It's going to be hard to get convictions for what police say went on here. First of all, because the victims live half a world away. And even if they could fly here, they wouldn't be able to identify what the call center worker looked like or even sounded like months later. So to prove this crime, they have to rely on other kinds of evidence, beginning with the hard drives that were once in these boxes, and then tracing the computer IP addresses that flowed through these wires. What they're trying to do is recreate the money trail between the Canadian victim and this call center. Where were the iTunes cards purchased? How were they converted into dollars? And finally, where did those millions end up? It is a massive hunt for digital fingerprints. And Indian prosecutors say they have never attempted one on this scale.
We seize the hard drives mainly and the documents, data.
Mukund Hotote is the top cop on the investigation.
Nothing is kept on record.
So they had no paper trail?
No. Everybody was, salary was given by cash and incentive was given in cash only.
Week after week, his team does the slow and low-tech work of analyzing fingerprints and sifting through phone transcripts, building the government's case.
Have a look at.
So these are all the phone calls that were sent out?
Yeah.
And their connections?
Yeah.
And where they could redeem, like this one came from Best Buy in Canada.
Yeah.
And they were from Richmond, British Columbia.
Yeah.
The call logs detail where victims purchased iTunes cards and how much was scammed from each. Raviv knows what police found during the raid and what it might mean for him.
They have a lot of evidences in terms of what we have been doing.
Tani's police chief predicts it will take years for the case to come to trial.
It depends on the court.
Does that mean that it could wrap up in 2 to 3 years? Is that a reasonable amount of time?
Possibly it could wrap up in 2 to 3 years, depending on the permission of the court.
The wheels of justice move very slowly in India. More than 22 million cases are bogged down in the courts. Vijay Mukhi. Typically, how long would it take for someone who's been charged to actually hear a verdict on the case?
Depends upon case to case. You know, if it's a murder, then because the judiciary understands murder better, maybe 5 years, 10 years. But if it's a cyber-related case, a technology-related case, much longer.
So white-collar crime could take decades?
Yes, 10, 20 years so.
After 72 days in jail and now out on bail, Raviv lives in fear that he'll be found guilty and have to go back.
Like I've acquired a nightmare. That's the worst place I would like to see in this entire world, would be a jail.
So the fact that these guys got caught, is that going to scare people away from setting up the same kind of scam?
No, it's going to be the other way around. It's going to tell people there's money to be made, there's money on the table. Don't make the same mistakes that these guys made. I see more such call centers, not less.
A scheme run from halfway around the world.
This was, at the time, the largest scam in dollar value.
And the Canadian connection.
There were days that he'd do $10,000, there were days that he'd do $50,000.
When W5 continues.
For 3 years, this office outside Mumbai was a thriving illegal call center, the operation hub of a massive tax extortion racket that stole hundreds of millions of dollars from victims across North America. In October 2016, a police raid nabbed 700 workers and arrested more than 80 people. But Indian police say the masterminds behind it fled the country. Chief of Police Paramveer Singh led the raid. He admits the case is a difficult one to prove. One big reason,
all of the victims are in North America. If a Canadian came forward as the victim of this crime, would that be acceptable to it?
That would be helpful, that would be acceptable and helpful as well. They would have to present themselves in the court.
Lucy was one of the victims of the scam. She lost $25,000, so she has no savings to travel. But she knows what she'd say to the accused if she could face him in court.
Why you want the money like this? You cannot do this to the people that is stealing money. And it's just like the robber, that it's really threatened.
The case investigators in India are building have logs showing the calls to Canada and the purchase of prepaid cards. As many as 50,000 Canadians were scammed. But were there accomplices in Canada too? Do you know whether or not there were people in Canada that were hired as part of this scam?
No, we have not come across this sort of a thing, not during our investigation.
But W5 has confirmed law enforcement in most Canadian provinces launched investigations into the scam. We've learned of one 5-month-long investigation that led to the arrest of a ring of 5 people, led by a young man who worked at this gas station just north of Toronto in Woodbridge. Police say he was recruited by another young man who worked at the donut shop right next door on behalf of a kingpin in the United States who needed help funneling that CRA scam money out of Canada. The ringleader's name is Dion's Damien, an immigrant from India, and he's currently serving a 2-year jail term after confessing to fraud and money laundering. Constable Beverly Pepper of Peel Regional Police was the lead investigator.
He advised that his role was to recruit people to receive money and provide account information to which deposits could be made. And they would immediately withdraw the money and turn it over to him, for which he would send back to his contact in the United States, and he would keep a portion of the profits.
And from the United States, were you able to trace where it went from there?
We were told that it was being sent back from the United States to India.
In large quantities?
In large quantities. In the case of Dion's Damien, over a 5-month period, he estimated approximately $1 million.
$1 million?
$1 million.
Damien's take of that, a tiny sliver of that million. Pepper says Damien made only about $50,000 over 5 months. So as far as the scams that Peel Region might look at, do you have any sense of how involved this one was or how large in proportion to all of the scams that might come through here?
This was, at the time, the largest scam in dollar value.
Fraud and money laundering wasn't all Dion's Damien admitted to and is now serving time for. He set up this deception too.
We had a separate victim that actually had 2 RCMP-looking officers show up at his door.
And in that case in particular, had they already been on the phone to somebody saying that if you don't do what I tell you to do, the cops are going to be here?
Yes. The victims are forced to stay on the phone at all costs with the caller. So while the uniformed officer showed up at his door, he remained on the phone with who he believed to be Canada Revenue.
Damien's methods meant big payoffs that went straight to his masters.
He said there were days that he'd do $10,000, there were days that he'd do $50,000.
Did he ever express that he was fearful of his life if he ever got out of it?
Yes.
W5 requested an interview with Dion's Damien from jail, but he declined. Beverly Pepper says after his arrest, Damien told police everything he knew.
Basically because he was so fearful. At this point, I have nothing to lose. He's like, I have nothing to lose. I will tell you anything you want to know.
The arrests in Canada and in India slowed the spread of the scam, and reports to the RCMP Anti-Fraud Centre fell significantly. Canadians are smarter too, challenging scammers on the phone, even recording the conversations.
I'm just going to forward your case file to the local police department.
Go yourself, you scammer!
But more recently, the scammers have changed the script, admitting there have been bogus calls, but trying to reassure Canadians this isn't one of them. Jeff Thompson of the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre.
Anything that's as successful as this scam has been, we're going to see something pop up again.
This one may be easing off,
but they may be just in the process of shifting the scam to another jurisdiction.
It's a matter of time, say, before somebody else says, hey, that was really successful, I was involved in it, I'm going to start my own thing.
In Mumbai, cyber expert Vijay Mukhi agrees.
I think they haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg, because it's very difficult for a local policeman who doesn't understand technology.
And is part of the problem the fact that the victims of this crime aren't in India?
I would say it's a very big part, because finally an Indian is not suffering, it's a foreigner. And because there's no local Indian who is the victim, the police and the other authorities and the rest of India tend to take this very lightly.
So for the tens of thousands of Canadians like Lucy, lured into running up their credit cards and going into debt in a panic, the loss of her dignity is only one cost of the scam.
$25,000 is the money that I have to pay back to the bank, and they've been charged interest for that money.
Do you know where these calls were coming from? Which country?
India. They said all the money gone to India.
And so in India, we asked Max, one of the young men who made those calls, if he would listen to Lucy's story so she would get her chance to be heard.
But this is what Lucy wanted you to hear.
He agreed to watch and listen.
So how much did you end up giving?
$25,000 altogether. I used to buy back my 3 credit cards.
$25,000. It's a huge amount.
Anything you'd like to say back to Lucy?
I'm just speechless.
Are you sorry?
Yes, I am sorry. To all those people who get in trouble because of me.
When they call you, they make you so scared.
Is that why you're talking to us today, to stand up?
Yes. We just want to bring this to all the people to know that this has happened to me. They threaten you. You don't have time to think anything.
They're preying on the victims so that they don't give them time to stop and think.
We have received
You or you get arrested.
Anybody that's asking for money, anybody that's demanding something right away,
Don't try to disregard this message.
hang up.